Hello everybody, welcome to the fourth and last video of history's first lesson, historiography development in the West. So we were talking about notable scholars. We have discussed in the previous video about René Descartes, Voltaire, George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, Leopold von Ranke. So now we will talk about the contributions of Karl Marx, then Michel Foucault, and then there are two points that are remaining, and they were from the development of scientific perspective in Europe and historiography. They were left aside, so we will talk about that also. Okay, so let's start our topic. Now, Karl Marx, he was also from Germany, and you all know about Karl Marx that he was the one who propagated communism. He introduced it to the whole world through his thesis called Das Kapital. And Friedrich Engels was also one of his partners. So, according to Karl Marx, history is not about abstract ideas. Okay, it was about living people. According to him, history was not only about any abstract ideas, it was about the living people and what kind of lives people have lived, what kind of problems they faced, any atrocities and all. This was his particular point of view toward his writing of history. Then he made some very important points. You would like to listen carefully. Now, what he's saying here is that relations between humans did take place by fundamental needs of people and ownership. Now, here you would like to give some serious concentration, and that is because this point is particularly important to understand. Okay, now relations between humans. Okay, how they took place? One is fundamental need, okay, and the other is the ownership. Not ownership of what? Means of production. Okay, ownership as well as nature of prevalent means of production to meet those needs. Now, what type of means of productions were used at that time? Prevalent means at that particular time. Okay, whatever means of productions were there to meet the needs which needs? The fundamental needs. Okay, that is the relations. That's how relations took place between humans. Okay, now the accessibility of these means may not be equal to different strata of the society. Now, the accessibility to the means of production, okay, it's not same to all the people of the society. Now, here different strata means the societies, different people, people who are poor, people who are middle class, people who are rich. Now this, okay, of the society. Now this may not be equal, means it is unequal. You all know that the differences between the society, what he is trying to say, that because of this inequality, it causes a division of the society into classes, and this leads to class struggle, and because of this the fights go on between the rich and the poor people. Okay, now that's how all this starts. So, according to Karl Marx, human history is a history of class struggle. Now, what he is trying to say, that the human history is history of class struggle. That's what he was saying in the first point, abstract ideas. Okay, it's not about history is not about abstract ideas. It is about the living people. That's what he was saying, and Human history is the history of class struggle. As the class that owns the means of production, means the inequality we just talked about in the last point, that owns the class that owns the means of production, obviously rich people, means of production, economically exploits the rest of the classes. Now, what do? They exploit them. They exploit the people who does not own the means of production. Okay, they economically exploit them. Okay, so that is a very important thought presented by Karl Marx, and his views about the history and particularly about communism is written in Das Kapital. This was the book he wrote. Okay, so let's move on to the next scholar, and this scholar, Michel Foucault, was from France. And if I forgot about Karl Marx was also from Germany. Okay, so Michel Foucault. Okay, the pronunciation is Michel Foucault. Okay, that is French. That's how they spell. Okay, not like us Indians. Okay, fine. The then way of arranging historical events in a chronological order is not right. Now look what he is saying. He is of the opinion that in chronological order, historical events should not be arranged. Means this is not right. That's what he's saying. He's saying that this is wrong. Okay, that was his view, and he presented that view in his book Archaeology of Knowledge. Okay, now look, he looks at the archaeology in a different way. You will understand why or how. He is saying that aim of archaeology is not to reach ultimate historical truth. What he's saying that archaeology means the excavation of the historical remains. Okay, like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Okay, that one. Then the archaeology's aim is not to reach ultimate historical truth, but to explain the various transitions in the past. Now, what is the aim of the archaeology according to him? That archaeology only explains what kind of things happened in the past. That was his view towards archaeology. Okay. Then he acknowledged that subjects such as psychological disorders, science of medicine, prison administration, etc., to historical analysis. Now, this was very important, and he is recognized because of this also. These subjects, such as psychological disorder, science of medicine, prison administration, etc., these subjects were neglected by other historians or other scholars. They did not acknowledge these subjects as important enough to include into historical analysis or into history writings. Okay, but Michel Foucault, he gave importance to these subjects also, and it proved to be very important in understanding the human behavior in the future. So that's why this is also a very important point. Now, the book he wrote is Archaeology of Knowledge, and he was also now Michel Foucault was also a French scholar. Okay, so now let's move on to the next point, which is Annales School. Okay, now Annales School, it was now in the textbook it is not mentioned, but it was established in 1929. Actually, Annales School was a journal, means a kind of newspaper or a magazine, but it was also a group of scholars or historians who had a particular way of looking at the history or its writing. Okay, so in 1929, a new school of historiography arose in France. Okay, which is known as Annales School. In France, this school of historiography was established. Okay, at the beginning of the 20th century. Okay, beginning of the 20th century. So a new thought was brought forward that history is not just about political events, kings, great leaders, wars, politics, and diplomacy. Now, what analyst school used to think that history is not only about these political events, kings, great leaders, wars, politics, or diplomacy, but it should also include other things like climate, local people, agriculture, trade, technology, means of communication, social structure, and their collective psychology. These should also be included in the history writing. That was his that was the view of the scholars of analyst school. So uh, these were some of the important points. And analyst school, this school was started by French historian. Okay, don't forget about that. Okay. Now let's move on to the next point, and that next point is feminist historiography. Now, females are one of the part of our world, and they were always neglected somewhat. So, feminist historiography came to the light when the writings of Simone de Beauvoir. Now, this lady historian, because of her writings, uh, the feminist historiography came to the light, and people started to give it importance. Now, first we will talk about feminist historiography, the definition of feminist historiography. Okay, the restructuring of the history from the perspective of women is called feminist historiography. You should learn this or you should understand this particular definition of feminist historiography, been asked in the exam. The restructuring of history from perspective of women is called feminist history. Means that the history should be written again, and it should also be included women's perspective. Means how women contributed, what was their role in the history, that should be included. According to their perspective, the writing of the history should be done. So this is called feminist historiography. Okay. Now, this particular thought of feminist historiography, uh, through the writings of Simone de Beauvoir, it helped in establishing the fundamentals of feminism. Now, why we have put a photograph of Simone de Beauvoir here? It is because because of her writings, the fundamentals of feminism could be established. And the feminist historiography not only gave emphasized the inclusion of women history, but also on rethinking of male dominated perspective of history. Now the feminist historiography is not only about the writing of the women's perspective in history, but the rethinking of the male dominated perspective of history also. So that was also one of their ideas. Now, many aspects of women's life became focus of historical research. Now, because of this emergence of feminist historiography, so many things are part of the life of women. It became the focus of the historical research. Now, people started, or the historians or the scholars started giving focus to, or they started doing historical research about the aspects of women's life in history, like employment, means what type of work they did, or their role in trade unions, means in the unions that were established by the workers, what were their role in these unions, and the family life, etc. These also were now focused by the historians now. So that was the particular outcome of the emergence of feminist historiography. And because of this, one more thing happened, that was after 1990, Women now were portrayed as an independent social class. This is also very important, and this outcome was because of the emergence of feminist historiography. That in after 1990, women were now also treated as a independent social class, right? Like just like middle class, upper class, lower class, just like that. An independent social class they were. Uh, Now recognized. Now why this recognition helps? This recognition helps to women because it helps them solve their problems, what kind of state they are living in. Okay, so this was feminist historiography. Okay, so thanks for watching. This was the last video in the first lesson of historiography development in the West. Thanks for watching.